Hello and welcome to Heart of the Matter. My name is Cradle.
And I'm Dikwa Ayo Adeosi, and we're here with one of our absolute faves, and actually a family member, I guess we could say.
Yeah, technically.
Bolatito Idakula. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you. So, there's so many things to talk about. There is LightHouse. There is Royalty, the book.
Yes.
There is My Jesus Experience.
Yes.
What else? Healing Cradle.
Healing Cradle.
Gosh.
I know, I'm like, wow, okay.
As in doing the most.
I
Doing
know.
the most.
So much.
Doing
Just
the
spread
Lord's
everywhere.
work. Doing the Lord's work. I
So-
don't think I want to talk.
Exactly, right?
I'm sorry, actually, everybody here is doing too much, to be honest.
But what's
yeah.
the genesis of it? I know many people have heard your stories in different, at different times. But for people who haven't heard the story, let's start there. What started the first? What was the first thing, and what started this journey of ministry and healing?
Okay, so I think the first thing will be my LightHouse.
Okay.
And that started, so after I got married, 2014, a few months later I got pregnant, and then 2015 the baby was born, and then a couple of days after she passed away. So she had a congenital diaphragmatic hernia, which meant that her diaphragms were not properly developed when she was in the womb, and so it meant that her stomach organs were going to her chest, or abdominal organs were going up. Took the space of the lungs and the heart and all of that, so she didn't have everything she needed to breathe. And so, of course, a couple of days after she was born, she passed away. Wow. And in the course of healing, I started writing a lot. I started journaling a lot. And then all of a sudden, God starts talking to me about, share this testimony about how, I'm still God in the middle of everything. And I'm like, and nobody ever talks about losing a child. It wasn't something that you ever heard anybody talk about publicly, especially not in Nigeria. So I was like, I was so scared because everybody's going to know my shame, because a part of what I felt, in fact, most of what I felt was shame. How could this happen to me? So I was so scared. And I remember Umilola, I remember telling Umilola, this is what God is leading me to do. And she was like, oh, send me the testimony. And I sent it to her, and she was crying. Oh, Tito, you have to share this with the world. And so it now became a case of, okay, you want to share this story. How do you share it? And that's where we created the My LightHouse platform, which was literally just a website where we shared inspiring stories of people that have gone through really difficult times and, have overcome it. And so the goal of sharing my story on that was to say, yes, I lost a baby, but God is still God in the midst of all of that. So I remember the story was called The Test Becomes a Testimony. And I was just saying that, look here, this happened, but God remains God. I'm still going to praise God. And even in the midst of this test, what I'm going through has even made me trust God even more. Because it was one of two options. Either I move away from God or I draw closer to God. And what that pain did was to draw me closer to God, which is not what happens for a lot of people. And in sharing that, other people were able to now find some kind of peace. They could find someone that could relate to their stories. And so that's how my LightHouse started. And then we started sharing testimonies and, encouraging stories. And I was writing a lot. And that was the beginning of everything.
Right. For me, one of the things I latch onto is, first off, even getting to the place of calling it a testimony.
Yeah.
Like, what was that journey like, dealing with the loss and getting to the perspective of even being able to perceive a testimony there?
I know, right? I know, now that you say it, I'm like, I don't know why we call it a testimony, because in the natural scheme of things, that's not what you call a testimony.
Right.
Yeah, but God is amazing, because it was just so clear that that's what we were meant to call it. How did we even get there? I think, so at first the process was difficult because there was a lot of pain, a lot of anger, a lot of questions. And, GLA, Guiding Light has been amazing. I met Coach Lillian, and we started talking, and she was working with me a lot on what I was going through then. And the more I spoke to her, the more I realized there were other things that I was dealing with that I had not dealt with. And it was in the process of dealing with all of that she started encouraging me to write. And I'd gone for this thing she did. I can't remember what it's called. And there were other women there, and we all were just kind of like prophesying to one another, and everybody was like, oh, Tito, you're meant to write, you're meant to go into media, and you're meant to just share God's love. And at that same time, God was telling me about writing. And so it was in that course that we just thought, this is a testimony, because in the midst of all of this, you see God even clearer. You see God's love. You see His goodness. You see His purpose. It was just so, wow. Like, I saw God's love in a way that I'd never seen it before. And that's why it became a testimony, as opposed to just, it was, God's love was so prevalent. And that's kind of what we also wanted everyone to see. Like, yes, it might look like God doesn't love you and all of that, but it's actually so present. And so that was kind of like the process leading to it.
One thing I'm really interested in, and I think because a lot of what I do is kind of get towards men. And I'm always looking for that perspective. You were not the only one in that situation who suffered a loss. You know, your husband, Bez, Superson Bez, also suffered, the loss. What was that dynamic as being married, suffering something like that? How did that play out? Your marriage. Also, what was his process? If you can speak to that a little bit.
I think it's interesting you say that, because I was actually just having a conversation with a group of women today, and we're talking about how when you experience something like a child loss or a miscarriage, it affects the marriage in so many ways, and women and men deal with things very differently. So in as much as I'm more emotional, I'm crying more, I'm upset, he's probably more inward with his emotions, so he's not talking as much. And what tends to happen in marriages is like the woman is looking like, didn't we go through this together? And every time I want to talk about it, you're like not keen to talk about it, and then you kind of start getting angry with your spouse. But he's not like he's not dealing with it. It just, men and women are different. That's how we were created. So the way we deal with our emotions is just different from the way men deal with their emotions. So I had to learn that. But one thing I realized was that I was hurting in a different way. So I had to get the help I needed. Because what happens is women are now, instead of you even healing, you're spending more time being angry with your husband, being more resentful with your husband because he's not encouraging, or he's not talking, he's not saying the right things. But you just don't understand that he just doesn't process the same way you do. Now, what happened was later on, I think when we started talking about it more, my husband explained to me that there were emotions he was dealing with. And on some level, he was probably even a bit angry with me for some of the things I had done when we were going through. Because before the baby died, we knew that it was a possibility. And the way I'd reacted was, I remember I said, you know what, I'm not going to let this just happen. So I went on a crazy shopping spree, spent all the money. I was in America, spent everything. I'm like, I'm going to buy everything. Forgetting that there was somebody in Nigeria that was hustling for the money. So I wasn't even taking him into consideration. And so he comes to me and like, you weren't even considerate of what I was going through. You were just all in your own feelings and emotions. But it was with time that we started having that conversation. And so what I'm learning is that instead of spending so much energy wondering, why is my husband not acting the right way? Why is he not doing the right thing? Just focus on your own healing, and the more you heal, the more your relationship can heal as a whole. So, I mean, it's not that men are not dealing, they just don't talk. And so your husband not talking doesn't mean he's not hurting. It just might manifest it in a different way, kind of thing. And so I've become more considerate of that. So even now in our relationship generally, when he is processing things, I'm not thinking, oh, he doesn't care or whatever. That's not it. It's just, so I learned to respect that. And then I think that really helped our marriage as well, because we had to have conversations that we wouldn't have had ordinarily. Yeah, we thank God, because Bez has also now been my biggest supporter. Everything I've done, he's always at the forefront of it, even when he's not necessarily understanding it. It's just like, well.
Yeah, because I was going to say, cause I mean, in this journey that you've been through from then till now, you've consistently talked about different aspects of your life, very personal stuff that people would be a bit shy to talk about, very vulnerable, and you are married to some man that you're talking about, and family and all of that. So really, how does that work? How does he feel about all of that?
The thing is, Bez, and I think this is one thing I'm grateful for, and I think everybody, if you're going to get married, just let God be at the center of that marriage. Because for me, everything I've done has always been God-led. And when you're married to somebody who understands that, who also has his own personal relationship with God, he's not tempted to question your relationship with God. So if God is leading me to talk about things that make him uncomfortable, it's God first before his emotions or how he feels about it. Like, what's this thing about shame, and I don't want people to know my personal life. But if God is leading you to share your personal life, to encourage somebody, what comes first? Your own personal interest or God's interest? And God's interest always comes first. So he has to respect that.
In terms of that, I always want to ask, because for me, with vulnerability, there's always this line of how far is too far, how far is it God said, and I'm assuming God said, but it's me.
Yeah.
So how do you? So have you ever had cases of feeling maybe you might have overshared, and how do you deal with that personally?
All the time. You know, and I think what Dick has been trying to say, that he hasn't wanted to say, is in my book Royalty, I talk about having abortions, right? And I'd had 2, and that really affected me when the baby died, because I thought I had them before I got married, and I've kept thinking maybe God is punishing me because of this. And this was something I kept to myself, and I was never going to share publicly. Like, why would you even want to tell anybody that in this world? I was never going to share publicly. And then God starts saying, oh, you need to write about this, you need to write about this. And of course you're thinking, firstly, me. Secondly, husband. Thirdly, world. Fourth, Nigeria. Like, how? Like, God, no, I don't want to do this. And, you know, it did feel like it was too much. And I had to go to bed and say, this is what God is saying. And of course, my husband, if God is saying, do. And in fact, that makes it even harder for me, because maybe I'm hoping he'll say, don't do it. And then this guy is like, oh, of course, what are we going to say? You have to do it. And so, that one was probably in fact, it's probably been the most difficult thing I've done. And I wasn't even admitting to 1 abortion, I was admitting to 2. And I was thinking, God, why? What's the purpose of this? This is too much. Nobody needs to know this. But in sharing that, God did 2 things for me. It freed me because God was calling me to ministry in a way that I wasn't comfortable with. And one of the things that always bothered me was, would people even want to listen to me if they knew my story, if they knew my past? Would they even wouldn't they judge me? So that always kind of held me back from fully embracing God's call for me. So the first thing he did was it freed me. Okay, you people know now. Now I can go and do whatever I want to do and, you know, speak loudly. The second thing he did was everybody else, all the people that read it, that had similar stories with condemnation, with shame, and in seeing somebody that was vulnerable enough to admit that this is where I'm coming from, they also now realize that, you know what, this feeling of condemnation, of shame, of guilt, all of that is not necessarily God. You know, my story ended up freeing a lot of people, as I now know that God wanted them to be freed. So there is a line, and there are still things I keep private, but honestly, at this point, I think God is in the, I'm not speaking for God, but I assume from my experience that God is tired of the fickleness, you know, the scraps, like things that are not real, surface, like everybody, the surface, you know. We all go there, we all paint this perfect picture. I think God is just like, no.
And it's so important, because one thing that I've realized, and just in different conversations as well, is that the power of kind of being vulnerable for yourself, what it means is if everyone has flaws, you know, the Bible says all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And so if you say it yourself, then
nobody can hold it.
It's one thing to pretend to be perfect, and then somebody else release it, then it looks like you were hiding it, and therefore all of a sudden no one can see.
Exactly. You know, and I think the message of no condemnation, and you know, when everybody else is condemning you, but the biggest person that condemns you is yourself, because that's what the devil would use to condemn you. And so everything you want to do, you just keep thinking, am I worthy? Am I deserving? I don't deserve this. Would God call me? Would God use me? I'm not the kind of person. And the more that happens, the less you can be everything that God is trying to make you to be. And so, as you said, when it's there. It's just so freeing, because nobody else can use it against me. Even the devil that maybe has been keeping me hostage, reminding me, is like, oh, she said it, now I can't use anything against her.
It also gives the ability to speak more freely without thinking, that's how, if I say this, somebody else will release this information. It's out there, and now you can do it. And we have to talk a lot more about all the other things you've done and have been doing. But before we dive into that, we're going to take a quick break. So make sure you stay with us right here on Heart of the Matter.
I could feel myself falling, like saying, bro, you're falling. Wow, you're falling. This guy, you are actually falling down, oh. This stuff that you see on TV is happening to you. God is real.
Who are you? Why are you black?
Welcome to the Heart of the Matter.
The whole world was looking for me.
She called me, she's like, oh my God, it's God that brought you back. And I just dropped to the floor.
I'm going to dive right into the heart of the matter.
What are your thoughts on Canada?
My thoughts on Canada?
Yeah.
Real random.
I'm really so excited today.
Just a tad.
very passionate about leveling the playing field.
Listening is not the only aspect of communication.
I believe that the solution is from the bottom up. If you don't talk now, you talk later.
His glory, His glory.
So let's break it down.
Welcome back to Heart of the Matter. We've been talking to Bolatito Idakula about some of the most honest things and aspects of her life and just vulnerability in general, and how God has used your vulnerability as a huge platform for many people and for healing so many people. We talked about LightHouse.
Yes.
So there's still Healing Cradle, Royalty,
My Jesus Experience.
My Jesus
Yeah.
Experience.
So-
Okay. So Healing Cradle was born out of the need to support other people, because when I first shared my story, I realized that this thing is very common. But one thing that a lot of people feel is that they're alone. They don't, even though it's common, it's almost like you still feel like it's not common enough. Yeah. So when it happens to you, there's always this thing of why me? Like, oh, I'm alone. You don't seem to know that other people have been through it. So every day somebody calls me with a new story and somebody that needs encouragement, and it's like they didn't know about it until it happened to them. And ironically, well, not ironically, but the fact that 1 in 4 pregnancies end in miscarriage or stillbirth, or a loss of a child. 1 in 4. That's crazy. So anyway, Healing Cradle then started because I realized that we needed to support one another. No woman or even a family, even though women are the people that usually come, men are still having problems being open with their emotions. Healing Cradle is like a support group where we come together and it's just a safe place to just finally express everything, So when a woman loses a child, there are a lot of emotions, or has a miscarriage, there are a lot of emotions that they deal with, and they question it. Is this normal to feel? Am I feeling the right thing? Is there something wrong with me? Why is my husband not acting this way? So there's so many questions, and they don't know where to go for those answers, because normally the answers they get is, get over it, Jerry. People don't do it like that, but people are always quick to tell you, stop talking about it, heal, move on, all of that. And it's frustrating because you might not be ready. Yeah. So Healing Cradle then became this safe place where we come together like quarterly just to talk. But even going forward, the goal is to now become even more than that, is to become a proper support group where we're praying together. Because after the first miscarriage, you get pregnant again. What happens? And I've heard about women that come to Healing Cradle before that then had miscarriages again. And I'm like, what am I doing here? What's the point of meeting to talk about our feelings if we are still going to go and have the same struggles? Then it defeats the whole purpose. So my goal, God, by God's grace, not me, God's work, is that going forward, no woman that comes to our support groups is going to have another miscarriage or the loss of a baby. So the goal is to go full on into spiritual work where we're praying together, supporting each other, confessing, and just being there and guarding ourselves, our babies, our marriages against these attacks. So I'm excited for that.
That just feels so good. I think that's just so next level. And I love the fact that you mentioned that people who come here are not going to go back and experience the same things that they have experienced that brought them here in the first place. But to pivot a little bit, you talked about the fact that there's all the fears and anxieties of after the miscarriage, you're pregnant again, and now you have 2 beautiful boys.
Yes, I do.
What just for both, well, maybe I guess with the second one it got a bit easier, but the first son you have, what was that like when you got pregnant again?
Man, so after my daughter passed away, I had another miscarriage, and that one was even harder. It wasn't harder, but it was hard because I had to go to the hospital. I had to do like an evacuation, going into surgery or whatever. It wasn't the best experience. And so, of course, I'm thinking the next pregnancy, oh God, you're faithful, because but you know what it was? I was angry. I was angry. Like, that fear turned into anger. I was ready to fight. So I started taking my confessions very seriously. And I even have confessions that I share with other women as well. So every time the fears came, I'll just start laughing and I'll just start confessing the truth of God's words. So I became a fighter. And I think that's something that a lot of us have to do. Like, you have two options. You can be a victim and be like, oh, this has happened to me before. It's going to happen again. I'm so scared. Or you can understand who you are in Christ and take your authority and just be ready for a fight. Because guess what? The devil's job is to steal, kill, and destroy. That guy is doing his work. And fear is one of the most powerful weapons that he uses to destroy and have access to everything God has given you. So if you don't know who you are just an open target. There's nothing like knowing who you are in Christ and fighting with that knowledge. And I think that's something that we're trying to achieve in Healing Cradle. That way you understand that you've won. It's not that you're going to win, you've won. And nobody can steal from you. And so I think in addressing this, I'm able to now help other women or families or couples when men come address it as well.
So is there that desire to find a way to reach the men as well? Because we've got to try and pull them out in their own way.
I think I just had to understand that God was calling me to women. I had to embrace that. Because the very first Healing Cradle meeting we had, I was so stubborn about it. I'm saying, no, it's the couple, so let the men and women come. So we opened it to the men as well. Firstly, I think it was only 2 men that came, and then my husband, who always has to come for everything. But what we realized in the course of conversation was that some of the issues were between the husband and wife. So you're trying to maybe address something the wife is going through, but the husband doesn't see it in the same way. And that might be because he's dealing with it as well in his own way. So we thought, this is not a good idea. It might be good to start with separating them, and then maybe as everybody works on their own healing, then there's also now space for couple counseling. Now, in terms of men, I think I'm learning that men are the ones that can touch men.
Because I think beyond the pain that people are going through as individuals, there's also, like you said, what the couple are going through and how much it can affect a marriage. Where blame factor comes in, is it your fault, is the other person's fault, and getting past that.
You'll be amazed by how a lot of what women are complaining about is how their husbands were. Oh, maybe he wasn't eating properly, that's why the miscarriages kept happening, or that's why it was even hard for us to get pregnant. And then we get pregnant and then he hasn't even changed his lifestyle. Or when the baby died, they didn't like the way their husband handled the situation. Maybe he buried the child without telling them. And so marriages are so broken because of this thing. And that's another thing we have to address, because it's all a lie. When the devil can get you to blame your spouse, it's not only stealing your child from you, it's stealing your marriage from you. That's his goal. He's trying to destroy you completely. And then when he takes the marriage, he'll take something else. And then before you know it, you're empty. And he's destroyed you completely. And then if you're angry with your husband, but you still want to have children with the husband, how is that going to work? How does that affect the dynamic? So now just come, let's have sex, let's have children, but our relationship is all messed up. So you might think you're okay, but guess what, 10 years down the line, you could be facing divorce because there's still so much resentment you didn't even deal with. So I'm always begging, I beg so much, please forgive your husband, please forgive your husband, please forgive your husband. So there's always something that you feel somebody is to blame for. But maybe instead of focusing on blaming, you can focus on love and forgiveness and, God's grace and just moving forward. So, men.
But just so we touch on so many things, I also want people to hear about, royalty and my Jesus experience. Really quickly.
Okay. The reason why my Jesus experience came up is I realized that there was a lot of emptiness as Christians. People go to church, but they don't feel anything. They don't know God. We're all going to church, but nothing's happening. We go back home, it's like nothing happened. Or we even read Bible, nothing's happening. And I just realized that people were losing faith in a different way. They were doing the activities, but they were losing the relationship. So my Jesus experience came up, and I think it's a God idea as well, where it's like, I want you to talk to people about the real relationship they have with Jesus. And that's why it's called My Jesus Experience. And I didn't want it to be talking to pastors that seem to know everything. I wanted to talk to people like you and I that can relate. So, this person is just like me. And I wanted to also talk to people that had overcome very difficult experiences, but they still had their faith. So in my Jesus experience, I talked to my friend Jola, whose son was born blind. And, that really helped other people to realize that nobody's life is perfect, but she still has faith. I spoke to Icon, who spoke about depression. I spoke to Dupe of Salt Lagos as well. I spoke to Dami, whose wife died a few months after, and now he's happily remarried. So the point is just to give hope back to people that have lost that hope, and to understand that is in your relationship with Christ, is in nurturing that you have more hope, and you can deal with whatever attacks come even in this natural world. So that's my Jesus experience is on YouTube. Royalty is just, and I think I've already touched on the topic, it was just letting people know who they are in Christ. And, you know, I realized
using
that
your story.
Using my story, because I think from growing up, even as a child, I had so many insecurities. I grew up in a polygamous home. I never felt like I belonged anywhere. I was this insecure girl. I think it was even those insecurities and, sexual abuse. I experienced that as well. I kind of lost who I was. I didn't know who I was. So I started to see myself as everything that everybody has said I was or I wasn't. You're not good enough, you're not beautiful enough, you don't deserve good things. And I started to believe those lies. So even until the point my daughter died, those were the words I was still hearing. Of course this had to happen to you. Of course this had to happen to you now. You're never going to be anything in life, So everything bad is going to happen to you. But the more I grew in my relationship with Jesus Christ, I realized that no, all those things are the lies. The truth of who I am is that I belong to Christ. And, my father is the King of Kings. And that means automatically I'm royalty. When the Bible says you're of a royal priesthood. And I had to accept that and wait a minute. And when you talk about royalty, when it says it's giving you dominion all over all the works of his hands, I'm like, wow. I shouldn't be cowering. I shouldn't be scared. I shouldn't be a victim. So even when things are happening to me, I still have to remember who I am. I'm not defined by what has happened to me or what has been said to me or what has been done to me. The fact of who I am still remains. I am royalty. You can't take it away. You can't take it away. You can make me question it, but you can't take it away. And
I think that there's so much, and there's so much deeper that we could have gone with so much of everything. But one thing I'm learning is, and the reality is, that there's so much to get from the experiences you go through. I think a lot of us, we want to avoid the test. And now you're such a fount of wisdom for people to come to.
Come to me.
So if people do want to reach out to you, find out more, what can they do?
So of course, now these days of social media, that will be the first one. Tito Idakula. And then we have the My LightHouse NG page. We have the @Healing Cradle. It's all on social media. Email hello@mylighthouse.com.ng. Of course, there's always Instagram. Just slide into a DM or the other, or send an email, and I'm always available. And then I think next year we're going to be going to a lot of counseling as well, so people get counseled properly. So that'll also be a service that we offer, so everybody knows who they are and they're not destroyed by the lies of the devil. I'm here in fighting mode. I'm there.
Perhaps. I think it's just amazing. For me, one of the important things that I got from everything you said to us is about wholesome healing. I think people don't realize that healing can take different forms, and it takes a community, engaging a community to really find true healing. And talking about women forgiving their husbands, and talking about men being a part of the conversation, so together they can really heal and kind of build their home again. I think it's important that people,
and even to emphasize that, apart from even the women, a big part of even the way women act, or even men, is actually from the childhood traumas that they've experienced that they're not even talking about, the things you've seen your parents do or the things that were done to you. So a lot of us still have to go back to our childhood and deal with a lot of things and relearn a lot of things. So healing is in so many forms and dynamics, and it's important that you're honest with yourself to say, I need help.
I love it.
So that is so much, and like you said, you can always reach out. Email hello@mylighthouse.com.ng. Offers counseling soon, right?
Yes.
And so there's so many ways and so much information that there is to get. Please make sure that you keep up with us at HOTM TV on Instagram and Facebook, and HOTM channel on YouTube. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure you gained as much wisdom as we did. We'll see you next week. Thank you.
Bye.